This case takes place in Indonesia on the 12th of May 2016. Enno Farihah was an 18-year-old woman who lived in the Tangerang district of Indonesia. She had recently graduated from a vocational school, and after graduation she began working in an office of a plastics factory. This plastics factory was some distance away from where her parents lived, but it did have accommodation for both men and women that was separated between genders. Enno lived in the company's accommodation just off-site from the factory. Every week she would return to her parents' house for a night or two and spend some time with her family. Enno was the fourth of 7 children, and she and her family were followers of Islam, and because of this, she was arranged to be married to a man at some point. However, in April of 2016, Enno was walking back to her accommodation after a day at work when she bumped into a teenager who was referred to in the media as R.A. The two had a conversation and exchanged numbers. For the next month, the two texted each other frequently and began somewhat of a relationship. At the time, R.A. was 16 years old and a student at a neighbouring high school not too far from where Enno lived. On the 12th of May 2016, Enno asked R.A. to come to her accommodation. She told him that because of the arranged marriage, the month-long relationship had to come to an end. The two decided to meet to say goodbye. At approximately 11:30 at night, R.A. arrived at the women's section of the accommodation. Enno met him at the gates, let him in, and the two walked to her room. Inside the room, the two spoke for around half an hour and began to kiss. But before too long, R.A. began to remove his clothing. However, Enno told R.A. that she had no interest in anything further. She was worried about the risk of getting pregnant, so she rejected his advances. Feeling humiliated and angry by this rejection, R.A. got dressed and left Enno's room. He stood in the section in between the female and male dormitories, lit up a cigarette and began to smoke. It's here where R.A. stumbled upon 2 other men, 24-year-old Rahmat Hartono and 24-year-old Imam Hapriyadi. These 2 men also worked at the plastics factory and lived in the men's dormitories. They asked R.A. who he was and what he was doing around there. R.A. explained to the men that he had been in a relationship with one of the women who worked in the plastics factory, but that the relationship had just come to an end. For some time, the 3 chatted and got along quite well. Then, these 2 men told R.A. that they wanted to see which of the factory workers was his girlfriend, and they told him to take them to her room. There was a gate that separated the women's dormitories to stop other people from getting in, but R.A. had not closed it properly, so the 3 were able to get inside. The 3 then crept over to Enno's dormitory. R.A. twisted the door handle and it was unlocked. Enno had forgotten to lock it. The 3 then entered her room. Enno had likely assumed that R.A. had left and closed the gate behind him. Thinking that the gate was locked, she likely left the door to her room unlocked and went to bed. Once the men entered, they stood over her as she slept. Imam and Rahmat both recognized Enno from working with her. Imam had worked in the same part of the office in the plastics factory as Enno and had taken a liking to her. He had asked a colleague what Enno's number was and had sent her a number of messages. Although Enno had not replied to a single message he sent, which according to Imam greatly angered him. Rahmat also knew who Enno was. He claimed that on a number of occasions she had called him ugly and said that his skin was too dark. Imam then grabbed one of the pillows on Enno's bed, placed it over her mouth and began to smother her. Enno awoke and engaged in a struggle. Imam then pulled a kitchen fork from his pocket and began to stab Enno in the face multiple times, whilst Rahmat pinned her down. The 2 men then ordered R.A. to go and grab a knife from the kitchen area. R.A. left the room and searched for a knife. However, he could not find one. He then went to the garden area of the accommodation and found a garden hoe. He returned to the room to find Imam still holding the pillow, which was now blood-soaked, over Enno's face. Imam then told R.A. to strike Enno in the face with the metal head of the hoe. RA raised the hoe and struck Enno in the face with the tool once. This blow to Enno's face stunned her and she stopped resisting. Imam and Ramat then began to force themselves upon Enno, whilst RA stood guard by the door. After the two men were done, they told RA that it was his turn. He tried, but he was unable to. He would later claim that the blood coming from Enno's face put him off. So instead, he began to bite Enno's legs and breasts, breaking the skin around the area of her left nipple. Now, this is the part that left me feeling deeply sickened. Ramat picked up the gardening hoe and inserted it into Enno's genitals. He then began to kick the metal head of the hoe, resulting in the handle impaling and rupturing Enno's internal organs, ending her life. 90% of the hoe handle had been kicked inside Enno. After killing her, the three took turns washing blood off their bodies. They then stole some of Enno's possessions, including her mobile phone. Before leaving the crime scene, they took all of the clothes in Enno's drawers and piled them on top of her. They did this to try and mask any smells of decomposition that would start in the coming days. The three then locked the door and left the scene as quickly as they could, leaving behind a mountain of evidence for the police to crack the case swiftly. When Enno didn't turn up to work, her friends became concerned. They messaged but didn't get a reply. Worried for her well-being, her friends knocked on the door to see if everything was okay. When she didn't respond, they broke into her room. Inside, they were met with the disturbing scene. The police were immediately called. Enno's body was taken away and an autopsy was conducted. The cause of death was determined to be massive internal bleeding caused by the garden hoe. 60 centimeters of the handle had been kicked inside Enno, damaging her lungs, heart and other organs. On screen now is the X-ray from the hospital. Fingerprints, bite marks, saliva and semen were also found on her body, giving the police vital evidence they needed to find the killers. After the news broke, the women who lived in the dormitories of the plastic factory soon left, no longer feeling safe in their accommodation. The police went to work to find who was responsible. From what I can gather, Enno's mobile phone was traced to RA, who had taken it from the scene, and other workers of the plastic factory that night had seen Imam and Ramat together late at night. Because of this, the two men were questioned and their rooms were searched. Inside, the police found Enno's blood on some of their clothing. In a matter of days, all three were quickly arrested and charged with the murder of Enno, and all three gave reasons for killing her. RA claimed that he was angry due to Enno rejecting his advances and because she was arranged to be married. Ramat claimed that Enno had been rude to him and called him ugly, and Imam stated that she had ignored his text messages, and thus they felt the need to kill her. DNA evidence from the crime scene was tested and matched all three suspects. The police then forced the men to reenact the murder, which was televised. The video of the reenactment is also available on YouTube and is incredibly disturbing to watch. Once the public found out, they were outraged and demanded that all three be executed for what they had done. The trial began in 2017, and what happened to Enno was read out to the court and the evidence was presented. Enno's mother was in attendance and had to sit through and hear every horrific detail of what they did to her daughter. According to various articles that reported the trial, the three showed little remorse for what they had done. Enno's mother shouted at their attorneys, asking them how they could sleep at night defending them, and if they could defend someone that did those things to their children. As far as I can tell, she never received a response. Both Imam and Ramat were found guilty and sentenced to death by firing squad. I'm unable to find any further information about these two individuals. Whether they have been killed yet, I do not know. RA was also found guilty, but due to his age, he was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. This extremely lenient sentence left the public wanting to take justice into their own hands. Over 100 people gathered outside the courthouse, eager to drag RA into the streets. Due to this, a large number of police had to provide protection for him as he left the court, resulting in a riot breaking out and a number of officers receiving injuries. Following the trial, Enno's mother spoke to the media about her disgust regarding his sentence. She firmly believes that RA should also be put to death for his part in the horrific murder of Enno. If this case wasn't disturbing enough already, I also found out that a number of people in Malaysia began to mock the murder. They took various items such as guitars and rakes and recreated the crime scene photographs in some kind of sick and twisted joke. I also have to warn you, be careful if you research this case further. Images of the crime scene are way too easy to find, and they are incredibly disturbing. Upon seeing them myself, it genuinely made me feel sick. What those three did to Enno is truly beyond horrific. The pain and fear she must have experienced is unimaginable.